Top 6 actors Michael Keaton doesn't like, simplified version note. This content contains unverified claims and should be viewed as entertainment rather than factual reporting. Top 6 actors Michael Keaton doesn't like most. Behind his serious looks and crazy energy that made him one of Hollywood's best actors, Michael Keaton has strong opinions about other actors that are just as tough as the characters he plays on screen. The actor who got nominated for an Oscar and changed superhero movies forever has kept a careful public image while secretly disliking some people. And this has shaped his amazing career. Michael remembers everything with perfect detail, said someone who worked with him for a long time. He has this amazing memory for when people were mean to him or betrayed him professionally, and it goes back many years. And once you're on his bad list, you're probably never getting off it. What makes these stories so interesting isn't just what happened, but how well Keaton has hidden these feelings during his 40-year career. He's known for focusing really hard and getting deep into his roles, and he rarely lets personal fights show up in his acting. But these private angry feelings have influenced which movies he picks, who he works with, and ultimately the path of his always changing career. Get ready for the real truth behind some of the most famous movie performances ever. Fights so intense they stayed hidden right in front of everyone across legendary films that millions have watched without ever knowing about the real hate simmering underneath Keaton's amazing character changes. 1. Jack Nicholson, the Batman. Saboteur Keaton never forgave. The most important of Michael Keaton's professional hate involves Jack Nicholson. A hate that didn't come from fighting on set during their work on Batman 1989, but from what Keaton thought was Nicholson deliberately trying to ruin his casting as the famous superhero. This wasn't just professional rivalry, explained a Warner Brothers boss who was involved with making the movie. This was about Nicholson publicly questioning whether Michael deserved the role that would define his career and doing it in a way that almost got him fired before filming even started. Their fight started during pre-production when Keaton's controversial casting as Batman made fans really angry like never before. While director Tim Burton stood firmly behind his choice, Nicholson, who was already signed to play the Joker, made things worse by saying he wasn't sure about Keaton in press interviews. He famously said, "Michael's a good actor, but Batman? The guy from Mr. Mom? I don't see it." According to many sources, these comments weren't just casual thoughts, but calculated efforts to pressure Warner Brothers into reconsidering Keaton's casting. Behind the scenes, Nicholson reportedly told executives he had agreed to play the Joker opposite a serious Batman and suggested the studio might be better served by an actor with more traditional heroic presence. Jack was working the back channels hard, said a casting director who knew about the situation. He wasn't just sharing an opinion. He was actively trying to get Michael replaced while publicly pretending to support the production. Michael found out and was absolutely furious. What turned professional tension into lasting personal hate was Nicholson's behavior during the film's release and success after. As Batman broke box office records and silenced critics of Keaton's casting, Nicholson began taking credit for the film's success, suggesting in interviews that audiences came for his Joker rather than Keaton's Batman. Many media outlets readily adopted this story. When the reviews came out praising Michael's performance, Jack started talking about how he'd taken less money in exchange for a percentage of merchandise, implying he was the smart one while Michael just took a salary, noted a publicity coordinator from the film. It was a deliberate attempt to maintain status hierarchy. The message being, he may be Batman, but I'm still Jack Nicholson. The final insult came during award season when Nicholson attended several events where he happily told stories about his early doubts about Keaton's casting. Reframing his earlier sabotage attempts as charming doubt he was happy to have been proven wrong about. According to those close to Keaton, this changed version of history particularly made him furious because it allowed Nicholson to publicly play the good sport while never acknowledging the damage his earlier comments had nearly caused. Their mutual hate had lasting consequences for movie history. Despite the massive success of Batman, Keaton and Nicholson never worked together again, with Keaton reportedly adding a no Nicholson clause to his contract for future projects. More importantly, when Warner Brothers thought about bringing Nicholson's Joker back for a small part in Batman Returns, Keaton used his contract approval rights to say no to the idea. Michael told the studio, "Him or me, your choice," revealed a Warner Brothers executive. Given Keaton's importance to the franchise at that point, it wasn't a difficult decision. The most telling evidence of their continued hate came decades later at a Hollywood event where both were present. According to multiple witnesses, when Nicholson approached Keaton with his trademark grin and tried to talk about Batman memories, Keaton responded with a brief nod before deliberately turning his back. A public snub of a Hollywood legend that stunned onlookers, but perfectly showed the depth of anger that 30 years had failed to lessen. 2. Jim Carrey, the co-star who crossed the line. Michael Keaton's intense dislike of Jim Carrey started during their work on Batman Forever, 1995, not from working together directly, as they shared no scenes together, but from what Keaton saw as Carrey's deliberate campaign to ruin the Batman franchise after Keaton had left the role. This wasn't just about creative differences, explained a production assistant who worked on both Batman Returns and Batman Forever. Michael saw Jim's over-the-top approach to the Riddler as a deliberate rejection of the more psychologically serious tone he and Tim Burton had created. It felt personal because it was actively erasing his legacy. Their fight began brewing when Keaton, after saying no to returning for a third Batman film due to creative concerns about the script and new director Joel Schumacher's vision, learned about Carrey's flamboyant interpretation of the Riddler. According to multiple sources, Keaton watched early footage of Carrey's performance and was visibly upset by what he saw as a cartoonish approach that ruined the serious groundwork he had laid in establishing Batman as a complex character rather than a comic book joke. Michael had turned down $15 million because he was protecting Batman's integrity, revealed a Warner Brothers executive. Then he sees Jim essentially turning the franchise into a live-action cartoon and getting paid $20 million to do it. The message wasn't subtle. Broader comedy was worth more than Michael's psychological depth. The situation got worse during Batman Forever's press tour when Carrey repeatedly made dismissive comments about the darkness of the previous Batman films, suggesting his more comedic approach was giving audiences what they actually wanted while never mentioning Keaton by name. The implication was clear, and according to those close to Keaton, deeply offensive given how hard he had fought to establish Batman as a character worthy of serious dramatic treatment. It wasn't just that. Jim was taking the franchise in a different direction, noted a casting director who knew both actors. It's that he seemed to be actively mocking what Michael had accomplished. There's a difference between creative reinterpretation and deliberate rejection, and Michael felt Jim was doing the latter. Their mutual hate reached new heights when Batman Forever, despite mixed reviews, made more money than both of Keaton's Batman films, seeming to validate Carrey's approach commercially, even as many critics and fans expressed disappointment with the franchise's new direction. According to those in Keaton's circle, this commercial success particularly stung because it suggested audiences preferred spectacle over substance, a philosophy of filmmaking Keaton had always rejected. The most telling evidence of their continued friction came years later when both were considered for a major studio comedy. According to production documents later made public, Keaton's representatives asked whether Carrey was being seriously considered before allowing Keaton to enter negotiations. When told Carrey was indeed a top candidate, Keaton immediately withdrew from consideration, a decision that puzzled many, but perfectly aligned with his long-standing policy of avoiding any professional association with the actor he held. Responsible for ruining his Batman legacy. Their fight represents more than personal hate. It symbolizes the fundamental tension in Hollywood between artistic integrity and commercial calculation. Keaton walked away from millions to protect his vision of Batman. Carey embraced a more commercial interpretation that, while financially successful, ultimately led the franchise toward the creative dead end of Batman and Robin. For Keaton, this outcome validated his original concerns while making Carey's success all the more difficult to accept. 3. Val Kilmer, the replacement. Keaton refused to acknowledge few Hollywood hatreds, remained as carefully hidden yet intensely felt as Michael Keaton's enduring contempt for Val Kilmer, the actor who replaced him as Batman and who Keaton reportedly referred to privately as the pretender to the cowl. This wasn't just about another actor taking over a role, explained a longtime Warner Brothers executive. This was about Val publicly pretending he was saving the Batman franchise from what Michael had established, something Michael viewed as both professionally insulting and factually ridiculous. Their fight started when Kilmer, after being cast as Keaton's replacement in Batman Forever, gave a series of interviews implying he would bring real acting credentials to the role and restore the character's heroic dimensions after what he characterized as Keaton's oddly neurotic interpretation, while never directly criticizing Keaton. By name, the implication was clear, and according to those close to Keaton, deeply offensive given the critical acclaim his performance had received. Michael had endured death threats when cast as Batman, fought tremendous doubt, and ultimately delivered a performance that redefined the character, noted a casting director familiar with both actors. Then here comes Val, walking into a guaranteed hit with zero resistance, acting like he was rescuing Batman from Michael rather than benefiting from the foundation Michael had built. The situation got worse when Kilmer began suggesting in press interviews that he had been Warner Brothers' first choice for Batman years earlier, but had said no. A claim multiple studio executives privately confirmed was entirely made up. According to production documents later made public, Kilmer wasn't even on the original list of candidates when Keaton was cast, making his changed version of history particularly annoying to Keaton. It was the unnecessary lies that really got to Michael, revealed an assistant director who worked on both Batman films. Val could have simply said he was honored to continue the role. Instead, he created this alternate reality where he was always the better choice, finally claiming what should have been his all along. Michael found it pathologically dishonest. Their mutual hate reached new heights during early screenings of Batman Forever, which Keaton refused to attend, but received detailed reports about from industry friends. According to those in Keaton's circle, he was particularly angry about what he viewed as Kilmer's cosplay performance, an imitation of Keaton's Batman voice and mannerisms rather than an original interpretation. Despite Kilmer's claims of bringing something new to the role, the most telling evidence of their continued friction came at a Hollywood function in the late 1990s, where both were present. According to multiple witnesses, when Kilmer approached Keaton and tried to discuss their shared Batman experience, Keaton pretended not to hear him before turning to talk to someone else. A deliberate public snub that stunned onlookers, but perfectly aligned with Keaton's private promise never to legitimize what he viewed as Kilmer's fake claims about the role. What makes this hate particularly important is how it influenced Keaton's relationship with the Batman franchise itself. According to those close to him, Keaton refused to watch any Batman films after his departure until Christopher Nolan's reboot with Christian Bale, which he praised specifically for wiping the slate clean of what came between his interpretation and Bale's. This 30-year grudge finally reached resolution when Keaton agreed to return as Batman in The Flash 2023, effectively erasing Kilmer's version from the primary DC timeline. a development those in Keaton's circle described as poetic justice 3 decades in the making. 4. Tom Cruise, the bait and switch that created a lifelong enemy. Michael Keaton's intense dislike of Tom Cruise stems from what industry insiders describe as one of Hollywood's most notorious bait and switch incidents, a professional betrayal during development of Rain Man 1988 that Keaton has never publicly discussed, but privately ranks among the most terrible experiences of his career. This wasn't just typical Hollywood recasting, explained a veteran producer familiar with the situation. This was a calculated deception that blindsided Michael at a crucial moment in his career transition from comedic to dramatic roles. Their fight started during early development of Rain Man when director Martin Brest, who had worked with Keaton on Johnny Dangerously, approached him about playing Charlie Babbitt opposite Dustin Hoffman's Raymond. According to multiple sources, Keaton spent months preparing for the role, researching autism, meeting with families affected by the condition, and helping develop the character through conversations with screenwriter Barry Morrow. The betrayal came when Brest was unexpectedly removed as director and replaced with Sidney Pollack, a change orchestrated partly through Cruise's agency, Ka, which was positioning their client for more serious roles after his success in commercial films. Within weeks of Pollack's appointment, Keaton was told he was being replaced by Cruise, despite his substantial contribution to the project's development. Michael was blindsided, revealed a casting director involved with the film. He'd been led to believe the role was his, had done extensive preparation, and then suddenly was told Cruise was taking over with no acknowledgement of Michael's developmental contribution to a character that would help win Cruise industry credibility. Turned professional disappointment into lasting personal hate was learning that Cruise had allegedly been pursuing the role behind the scenes, even while Keaton was still officially attached. According to production documents later made public, Cruise's representatives had been negotiating terms while Keaton was still actively preparing for the part. A breach of industry etiquette that particularly made Keaton furious. In this business, actors don't usually blame each other for casting decisions. That's the studio's call, noted an agent who represented Keaton during this period. But when Michael discovered Tom had been actively campaigning for a role that wasn't officially available while Michael was still working on it, that crossed a line from normal Hollywood competition into something he viewed as personally dishonorable. The situation became more annoying when Rain Man went on to become a critical and commercial success, winning 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. While Hoffman received most of the acting praise for his portrayal of Raymond, the film significantly elevated Cruise's standing as a serious actor, precisely the career evolution Keaton had been seeking for himself after being typecast in comedic roles. It was a double injury, explained a director who later worked with Keaton. Not only did he lose a potentially career-transforming role, but he had to watch Cruise receive exactly the critical reappraisal Michael had been working toward. The role that could have been Keaton's Birdman 25 years earlier went to someone he believed had gotten it through back-channel manipulation. Their mutual hate had lasting consequences for both careers. According to those close to Keaton, he later said no to multiple projects where Cruise was attached as producer or co-star, including a major action film in the early 2000s that would have paired them as enemies. Meanwhile, the intensity of Keaton's private feelings became evident when, during interviews for Birdman decades later, he pointedly praised actors who earned their dramatic credentials through theater and independent film rather than leveraging commercial success into unearned prestige projects. A thinly veiled reference most industry insiders recognized as directed at Cruise. This long-simmering resentment represents more than typical Hollywood rivalry. It reflects the fundamental injustice Keaton perceived in watching another actor benefit from groundwork he had laid while being denied the opportunity to complete what he had started. The fact that Keaton eventually achieved with Birdman the critical recognition he had sought with Rain Man provided some vindication. but according to those in his circle, never fully erased the bitterness of what he considered not just a lost opportunity, but a profound breach of professional ethics. 5. Robert Downey Jr., the superhero rival who became personal, the intense professional rivalry between Michael Keaton and Robert Downey Jr. went beyond typical Hollywood competition to become deeply personal. A mutual hate rooted in their parallel journeys as actors who redefined superhero cinema through completely different approaches. This wasn't just about two actors playing comic book characters, explained a Marvel executive who witnessed their interaction at industry events. This was about fundamentally opposing philosophies of performance and celebrity that made genuine respect between them virtually impossible. Their fight started when Downey's Iron Man success in 2008 launched the Marvel Cinematic Universe, establishing a template for superhero films that emphasized witty banter, charming personality, and the seamless merging of actor and character. This approach stood in stark contrast to Keaton's revolutionary work in Batman 1989, which had deliberately created distance between actor and icon through psychological complexity and the now famous separate Batman Bruce Wayne voices. According to those close to Keaton, he viewed Downey's approach as superficial charm over substance, a criticism that became particularly pointed when Downey began receiving credit for reinventing the superhero genre. Despite Keaton having broken that ground 20 years earlier, with considerably less studio support and against far greater initial doubt, Michael felt erased from the history Downey was claiming to have created, revealed a longtime Keaton associate. When critics wrote about Downey revolutionizing superhero films without acknowledging Michael had already done it, and done it when it was actually risky, the resentment really took hold. The situation got worse during press for Spider-Man Homecoming 2017, where Keaton played the villain Vulture opposite Tom Holland's Spider-Man in the MCU. According to set sources, Keaton was particularly irritated by constant references to the Downey model of superhero performance during production discussions, despite his own pioneering work in the genre decades earlier. There was this moment during a production meeting where someone praised the innovative approach to superhero films the MCU had created, and Michael just went silent, recalled a crew member. Later, he told a few people, "I was fighting for a serious Batman when Downey was still getting arrested. Now he's the template. That's some changed history." What turned professional frustration into personal hate was Downey's public response when asked about Keaton's return to superhero films. In a widely circulated interview, Downey offered what appeared to be sincere praise, but included the qualification that Keaton was returning to a genre that's evolved considerably since his day, phrasing that, according to those in Keaton's circle, he found patronizingly dismissive of his foundational contribution to that very evolution. Their mutual dislike became briefly visible during a Marvel press event where both were present. According to multiple witnesses, when Downey approached with his characteristic overly friendly greeting, Keaton responded with minimal courtesy before deliberately engaging with other actors present. A subtle but unmistakable snub that industry insiders immediately recognized as significant given Downey's status as the MCU's central figure. What makes this hate particularly revealing is how it reflects the tension between two distinct approaches to both acting and celebrity. Downey embraced his public persona as inseparable from his characters, cultivating a celebrity identity that blurred the lines between Robert Downey Jr. and Tony Stark. Keaton, conversely, has always maintained rigid boundaries between his characters and himself, rejecting the notion that an actor's public personality should influence or inform their performances. It's a fundamental philosophical disagreement about what acting should be, observed a director who has worked with both men. Michael believes in disappearing into roles. That's why Birdman resonated so deeply with him. Robert believes in bringing himself to roles and making that authenticity the performance. They're approaching the same craft from opposite directions, and each views the other's approach as fundamentally wrong. This clash of performing philosophies continues shaping both men's careers, with Keaton's return as Batman in The Flash representing a vindication of his approach, proving that his psychologically complex interpretation remains compelling decades later, precisely because it wasn't built on his personal charm, but on a fully realized character separate from himself. 6. Bill Murray, the comedy legend who never gave credit. One of Michael Keaton's longest-running and most carefully hidden professional hatreds involves Bill Murray. A resentment rooted not in direct conflict, but in what Keaton perceives as Murray's deliberate failure to acknowledge Keaton's critical role in his early career success. This isn't about a specific incident, explained a producer who worked with both actors in the 1980s. This is about Michael feeling erased from a significant chapter of comedy history, specifically how his contributions to Night Shift helped create the template for Murray's entire film career. Their complex relationship traces back to the early 1980s, when Keaton's breakthrough performance as Billy Blaze in Night Shift 1982 established a new model for comedy leads. The rapid-fire improvisational, slightly manic energy that would later become Murray's trademark in films like Ghostbusters. According to comedy writers from that era, Keaton's approach represented a significant departure from the more structured comedy performances of the 1970s, creating a bridge between traditional character work and the more free-form style that would dominate 1980s comedy. Michael essentially invented the comedy persona Murray perfected, asserted a veteran comedy director. That hyperverbal, slightly dangerous energy that could turn from funny to threatening in an instant. That was Keaton's innovation. But Murray got the credit for making it the mainstream standard. What turned professional frustration into personal resentment was Murray's continued rise to comedy stardom throughout the 1980s. While Keaton struggled to escape typecasting after Night Shift and Mr. Mom, according to those close to Keaton, he became increasingly irritated by interviews where Murray discussed his distinctive comedic approach without acknowledging the path Keaton had cleared, particularly since Murray had reportedly been complimentary about Keaton's influence in private industry conversations. There was this painful asymmetry, noted a casting director familiar with both actors. Michael would see Murray praised as a comedy revolutionary for doing essentially what Michael had pioneered years earlier. Meanwhile, Michael was fighting to be taken seriously because he'd been so successful in creating that manic comedy persona that everyone now associated with Murray. The situation reached a breaking point during the development of Ghostbusters 1984, a project Keaton was briefly considered for before Murray was cast. According to production documents later made public, director Ivan Reitman had specifically referenced Keaton's energy in Night Shift when describing what he wanted for the character of Peter Venkman. When Murray ultimately received widespread acclaim for essentially delivering what Keaton had already established as his signature style, the sense of professional injustice deepened. Michael wasn't upset about not getting Ghostbusters, clarified a longtime friend of Keaton. He was upset about watching Murray receive praise for an approach Michael had pioneered, while Murray never once acknowledged that influence. It felt like watching someone else get credit for your innovation. Their mutual tension became briefly visible during a Saturday Night Live reunion event where both were present. According to multiple witnesses, when Murray approached Keaton with his characteristic casual charm, Keaton responded with minimal courtesy before deliberately turning his attention elsewhere, a subtle but unmistakable rejection that puzzled observers unaware of their complicated history. What makes this hate particularly significant is how it influenced Keaton's subsequent career choices. According to those familiar with his thinking, the experience of watching Murray receive recognition for the comedic style Keaton had established accelerated his determination to break from comedy entirely, a decision that led to his transformative casting as Batman, and ultimately the dramatic roles that would redefine his career. In a strange way, Murray's success using what Michael viewed as his approach pushed Michael toward the dramatic work that eventually brought him his greatest acclaim. Observed a director who worked with Keaton in the 1990s. The resentment was real, but it ultimately drove Michael to find his own completely different path rather than competing on ground. Murray had claimed, "This lingering tension represents more than typical professional jealousy. It reflects the complex reality of creative influence in Hollywood, where innovations often become attributed to those who popularize them rather than those who pioneer them." For Keaton, Murray became the symbol of this uncomfortable truth, that in entertainment, historical accuracy often matters less than public perception, regardless of who truly deserves the credit. The legacy of Keaton's Hollywood feuds, as we've explored these 6 intense hatreds that shaped Michael Keaton's remarkable career. A more nuanced portrait emerges of the actor behind the versatile performances, a complex individual whose conflicts weren't merely personal, but reflected deeper principles about artistic integrity, professional respect, and proper recognition. What makes Keaton's hidden resentments particularly revealing isn't just their intensity, but what they tell us about his character and values. His hate toward Jack Nicholson stemmed from what he perceived as deliberate sabotage of his career-defining opportunity. His contempt for Val Kilmer reflected his intolerance for historical revision and false claims. His resentment of Robert Downey Jr. originated in the erasure of his pioneering contribution to superhero cinema. Throughout these conflicts, a consistent theme emerges: Keaton's uncompromising commitment to authenticity and proper attribution. Whether rejecting Tom Cruise's allegedly underhanded tactics or resenting Bill Murray's failure to acknowledge influence, Keaton's strongest hatreds weren't about petty jealousies, but about what he considered violations of professional ethics and historical accuracy. Michael's feuds aren't random. They follow a clear moral code, observed a director who has worked with him multiple times. He doesn't resent success. He resents success achieved through methods he considers dishonorable or success that comes without acknowledging those who made it possible. This perspective helps explain why Keaton, despite these intense private hatreds, has maintained his reputation as one of Hollywood's most professional and focused actors. His conflicts aren't driven by ego or insecurity, but by deeply held principles about how the entertainment industry should operate and how creative contributions should be recognized. Values he refuses to compromise, even when maintaining them. Costs him professionally. Perhaps most significantly, these hatreds have ultimately proven productive for Keaton's artistic development. His determination to establish a distinct identity from Bill Murray pushed him toward the dramatic roles that eventually brought him his greatest acclaim. His frustration with how superhero films evolved after his Batman tenure likely influenced the meta-commentary on fame and artistic integrity that made Birdman his defining late-career triumph. In a strange way, Michael's resentments have served him well, noted a long-time Hollywood observer. They fueled his determination to forge his own path rather than following industry expectations. The same stubborn insistence on proper recognition that created these feuds also drove him to make the unconventional choices that kept his career vibrant for over 4 decades. As we reflect on these carefully concealed conflicts, we gain insight not just into Hollywood's hidden dynamics, but into the complex character of an actor whose principled approach to his profession has sometimes put him at odds with an industry built more on relationships than righteousness. Michael Keaton's hatreds, like his performances, reflect a personality that accepts nothing less than complete commitment to the standards he believes should govern both art and professional conduct. If you found this exploration of Hollywood's hidden conflicts enlightening, please hit that like button and subscribe for more glimpses behind entertainment history's carefully constructed facades. We'd love to hear in the comments which revelation surprised you most, or which other Hollywood legends you'd like us to investigate in future videos, Doc. Until next time, remember that the most compelling dramas in Hollywood often unfold not on screen, but behind it. And sometimes understanding the private battles of our cultural icons helps us better appreciate the artistic integrity they bring to the performances that continue captivating us decades later.